She was just another passenger in seat 14A reading quietly. Nobody knew who she was. Then both engines failed over the mountains. 185 people were about to die. She walked into the cockpit and helped land the plane. Above them, F-22 fighter jets circled and spoke her call sign. Before you watch full story, comment below. From which country are you watching? Don't forget to subscribe. The Boeing 777 was cruising at 37,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains when things started going wrong. Flight 831 from Seattle to Dallas carried 185 passengers and a crew of 12. It was a routine Thursday afternoon flight, the kind that happened thousands of times every day across America. Passengers were reading, sleeping, watching movies. Flight attendants were serving drinks. Everything was completely normal. In seat 14A, a woman named Sarah Hayes sat quietly reading a book. She was in her late 20s, wearing jeans and a navy blue sweater. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like any other passenger, maybe a college student or young professional traveling for work. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything special. Hayes had been flying commercial for the past 6 hours, connecting through Seattle on her way home to Texas. She was exhausted but content. This was her first vacation in 2 years, and she had spent a wonderful week hiking in Washington State. Now, she just wanted to get home, see her family, and sleep in her own bed. What none of the passengers or crew knew was that Sarah Hayes was actually Captain Sarah Viper Hayes, one of the Air Force's most elite fighter pilots. She had flown F-16S and F-22 Raptors in combat zones, logged over 3,000 flight hours, and earned a chest full of medals for valor and skill. Her call sign Viper was known throughout the military aviation community as belonging to one of the best pilots of her generation. But today she was on leave, traveling in civilian clothes, trying to be just another passenger. She had deliberately not mentioned her military background when boarding. She wanted a peaceful flight without the questions and conversations that always came when people found out she was a fighter pilot, especially a female fighter pilot. The questions got old after a while. Hayes was deep in her book when she felt the plane shudder slightly. It wasn't normal turbulence. Her trained instincts immediately recognized something different in the vibration. She looked up, alert but not alarmed. Probably just a rough patch of air. The plane steadied, and she went back to reading. 5 minutes later, it happened again, this time stronger. The plane shook, and there was a loud bang from somewhere in the back. Passengers gasped. Someone screamed. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, trying to sound calm, but with an edge of tension underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, take your seats immediately. Hayes closed her book and fastened her seatbelt, her mind already analyzing what she had felt. That bang wasn't turbulence. That was mechanical. Something on the aircraft had failed. She looked out the window and saw smoke trailing from the left engine. Her stomach tightened. Engine failure. That was serious, but manageable if the pilots were good and the other engine held. Then the plane started descending. Not the gentle descent of a normal landing approach. This was steep, nose down, losing altitude fast. Passengers were screaming now. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The cabin filled with panic and terror. People were crying, praying, calling loved ones. Hayes grabbed her oxygen mask and put on. Her military training keeping her calm while others panicked. She listened to the sounds of the aircraft, felt the angle of descent, assessed the situation with the cool analysis of someone who had faced death before and survived. They were in serious trouble. The pilots were fighting to control the plane, but something was very wrong. The captain's voice came back on, no longer trying to hide the fear. This is the captain. We have lost both engines. I repeat, both engines are out. We are declaring an emergency. Brace for impact. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for emergency landing. Both engines. Hayes's blood went cold. A twin-engine failure was catastrophic. Without engines, the plane was essentially a glider, and a 777 was a very heavy glider that didn't glide well. They were over mountains with few suitable landing sites. The pilots would be desperately looking for anywhere to put down. This was bad, really bad. Around her, passengers were hysterical. The man next to her was frozen in terror, gripping his armrests so hard his knuckles were white. The woman across the aisle was sobbing uncontrollably. Flight attendants were shouting instructions about brace positions, but many passengers were too panicked to listen. Hayes made a decision. She unbuckled and stood up, ignoring the steep angle of the plane. She grabbed the seat backs for balance and made her way toward the front, moving against the tilt of the descending aircraft. A flight attendant tried to stop her. "Ma'am, you need to sit down immediately." Hayes looked her in the eye. "I need to talk to the pilots right now. I'm a military pilot, and I might be able to help." Her voice had the tone of command that made people listen. The flight attendant hesitated only a second, then nodded. She grabbed the intercom phone and spoke to the cockpit. 10 seconds later, the cockpit door opened. Hayes moved forward quickly. Inside the cockpit chaos, both pilots were working frantically, trying every procedure, flipping switches, pushing buttons, attempting to restart engines that refused to respond. The instruments showed a nightmare scenario. No thrust, altitude dropping fast, mountains ahead. The captain, a gray-haired veteran named Davidson, looked up as Hayes entered. "Who are you? You need to get back to your seat." Hayes spoke fast and clear. "Captain, I'm Sarah Hayes, Air Force Captain, F-22 pilot, 3,000 flight hours, including emergency procedures and dead-stick landings. I know aircraft systems, and I know how to handle emergencies. Tell me what's happening, and maybe I can help." Captain Davidson stared at her for 1 second, then made a decision. They were going to crash anyway. What did he have to lose? Both engines failed simultaneously. "We tried everything. They won't restart. We're a glider now, and we're losing altitude fast. We have maybe 3 minutes before we have to put this bird down somewhere, and there's nothing but mountains below us." Hayes leaned between the seats and scanned the instruments. Altitude, airspeed, descent rate, fuel flow, hydraulics. Her mind processed everything in seconds. What caused the dual-engine failure? The first officer answered without looking up from his controls. "We don't know. It happened almost simultaneously. We think maybe contaminated fuel or a fuel system failure that cut flow to both engines." Hayes thought fast. "Have you tried cross-feeding from the auxiliary tanks? Sometimes there's clean fuel there if the main system is contaminated." Captain Davidson looked at her with surprise. "We haven't tried that. Tom, reconfigure the fuel system. Try the AUX tanks." The first officer's hands flew over the controls, switching valves, rerouting fuel flow. Seconds ticked by. The altitude counter kept dropping. 8,000 feet, 7,000, 6,000. Mountains were getting very close. Come on," Hayes whispered, watching the engine instruments. Nothing. The engines remained dead. They had tried her idea, and it hadn't worked. The captain was scanning ahead desperately. "There, that valley. It's our only chance. It's not flat, but it's flatter than the mountains. I'm lining up for emergency landing." Hayes looked where he was pointing. It was a narrow mountain valley with a meadow. Rocky and uneven, but maybe long enough if they were lucky. It was their only option. That's her best bet. "Do you want me to handle anything while you focus on flying?" "Radio, tell air traffic control our position and situation." Hayes pulled out the radio and keyed the mic. "This is ground. Thank you for the overwatch. All passengers and crew are accounted for. We have minor injuries, but no critical casualties. Please relay to emergency services that we need transport for approximately 197 people." There was a pause. Then the F-22 pilot's voice came back confused. "Ground, who is this? Are you military?" Hayes smiled, slightly despite the pain and exhaustion. "This is Captain Sarah Hayes, Air Force F-22 qualified. I was a passenger on this flight, but assisted in the cockpit during emergency." Another longer pause. Then the F-22 pilot's voice came back, and this time there was clear shock in his tone. "Say again. Did you say Sarah Hayes? Call sign." "Affirmative. That's me. This is Captain Marcus Santos. We've met at Nellis. You instructed my weapons school class 2 years ago. I can't believe you're down there. Are you injured?" "Negative. Bruised, but operational." "Good to hear your voice, Marcus. Thanks for following us down." The second F-22 pilot cut in. his voice full of respect and amazement. "Ma'am, this is Viper 2. Did you help land that aircraft?" "Assisted the commercial pilots." "Yes, they did the heavy lifting. I just helped with procedures and radio work." Viper lead came back. "Ma'am, we're going to stay on station until help arrives. And Viper, we're going to tell everyone about this. You saved 185 passengers today. That's going in the history books." By now, Captain Davidson and the first officer had made their way over to Hayes. They had heard the radio conversation. Davidson looked at her with newfound understanding and respect. "You're not just a military pilot. You're a fighter pilot, an F-22 pilot, and they know you by your call sign." Hayes shrugged, embarrassed. "It's a small community. We all know each other." The first officer was staring at her in awe. "You helped save all these people, and you're a combat pilot. Why didn't you tell us who you were when you came into the cockpit?" "Didn't matter who I was. Only mattered what I could do to help." Emergency vehicles started arriving. Fire trucks and ambulances making their way up the rough valley terrain. Paramedics rushed to treat injuries. News helicopters appeared in the distance. The passengers were being taken care of. Overhead, the two F-22s continued circling, standing guard over the crash site. Then Viper lead did something unexpected. He broke from his circular pattern and made another low pass directly over the survivors. As he passed, he tipped his wings in salute, the traditional aviator's gesture of respect. His wingman followed, also tipping his wings. Then both pilots spoke simultaneously over the open frequency, their voices broadcast for everyone with a radio to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen on the ground, this is Viper Lead and Viper 2. We want you to know that today you were saved by one of the finest pilots America has ever produced. Captain Sarah Hayes, call sign Viper, is a warrior and a hero. She flew combat missions that will never be declassified, trained pilots who protect our nation, and today she saved your lives. It's an honor to share the sky with her. Viper, we salute you." The two F-22s pulled up into a steep climb, doing a victory roll as they climbed, then leveled off and resumed their protective circle overhead. Hayes stood there with tears in her eyes, listening to her fellow pilots honor her over the radio. Around her, passengers who heard the transmission were looking at her with awe and gratitude. Captain Davidson put his hand on her shoulder. "You save us all. Without your help in that cockpit, without your knowledge and your calm, we would have crashed into the mountain. Those 185 passengers are alive because of you." The passengers began to realize who she was. The quiet woman from seat 14 was the reason they were standing here instead of being dead on a mountainside. They started clapping, then cheering, then surrounding her, thanking her, hugging her, crying with gratitude. Hayes tried to wave them off. The pilots did the flying. The flight attendants evacuated everyone. I just helped where I could. But an elderly man, the husband of the woman Hayes had helped down the slide, shook his head. "Young lady, I heard what those fighter pilots said. I heard them call you a hero. You saved my wife. You saved all of us. Don't you dare try to minimize that." The news helicopters landed and reporters rushed over. They had heard the radio transmission too. "Is it true? Are you a fighter pilot? Did you help land this plane?" Hayes was exhausted, in pain, and overwhelmed, but she gave them a brief statement. "I'm an Air Force captain. I happened to be on this flight. When the emergency occurred, I offered my assistance to the flight crew. Captain Davidson and First Officer Tom Rodriguez did an incredible job landing this aircraft under impossible circumstances. The flight attendants saved lives with their evacuation procedures. I'm just glad everyone survived." But the reporters had already heard the full story from passengers. "The pilots say you saved them. The passengers say you were in the cockpit helping. And those F-22 pilots just called you a hero over the radio." Hayes looked up at the two fighters still circling overhead, protecting everyone below. "Those pilots up there are my brothers in arms. We're all part of the same team. Today, we all did our jobs. That's what matters." Over the next hours, as survivors were transported to hospitals and the crash site was secured, the full story emerged. Hayes had provided crucial assistance in the cockpit, suggesting procedures, managing communications, and keeping everyone calm. Her presence had made the difference between a survivable crash and a catastrophic one. The flight data recorder would later confirm that her suggestion to increase drag at exactly the right moment had slowed the plane just enough to make the landing survivable. Captain Davidson gave interview after interview praising her. "That woman is the reason I'm alive. The reason my first officer is alive. The reason 185 passengers are alive. She walked into my cockpit and became my lifeline. Her knowledge, her skill, her calm saved us all." The Air Force Public Affairs Office released a statement about Captain Sarah Viper Hayes' service record. 15 years of service, multiple combat deployments, dozens of medals, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, instructor pilot at the Air Force Weapons School, and one of only a handful of female F-22 pilots in history. Her record was remarkable. But the moment that went viral, that was replayed on every news channel, that became the defining image of the incident was the audio of those two F-22 pilots speaking her call sign over the radio, and the image of two fighter jets tipping their wings in salute over the crash site. Marcus Santos and his wingman landed at a nearby Air Force base and gave their own interviews. Viper is a legend in the fighter community, the best of the best. When we heard she was on that plane, when we heard she had helped land it, we knew those people were in the best possible hands. She's someone we all aspire to be like. Hayes spent 2 days helping with the investigation, giving statements, and checking on the passengers she had helped. Many of them sought her out to thank her personally. The elderly woman hugged her and cried, "You're my angel. God put you on that plane to save us." Hayes hugged her back. "I'm just a pilot who was in the right place at the right time." But it was more than that. It was years of training, thousands of hours of flight time, countless emergencies practiced, and procedures memorized. It was the warrior spirit that refused to give up even when engines failed and mountains loomed ahead. It was the calm under pressure that only came from facing death before and learning how to beat it. 2 weeks later, Hayes was back on active duty, flying training missions, instructing new pilots. But she was different now. She had been recognized publicly in a way that most military pilots never were. Her call sign Viper was now known beyond the military community. People recognized her on the street. She received letters from the survivors, from their families, from people around the world inspired by her story. Children wrote, saying they wanted to be pilots like her. Young women wrote, thanking her for showing them what was possible. Veterans wrote, saluting her service. And every time she flew now, every time she climbed into an F-22 cockpit and pulled back the stick to climb into the sky, she thought about those 185 passengers. She thought about the moment when everything hung in the balance, when survival seemed impossible, when her training and experience became the difference between life and death. She saved 185 passengers that day, and then her fellow F-22 pilots spoke her call sign over the radio for the world to hear, reminding everyone that heroes don't always wear capes.